using tools like Unity, much smaller teams can make much more ambitious projects, right?
Yeah, and I think that's definitely part of it. And then I think just like the audience and the means to reach the audience is a lot more robust, developed, sophisticated, whatever, now than it was like 4 or 5 years ago, right? So, I mean, obviously people saw this from like starting in like 2008 with like Xbox Live Arcade and then PSN or whatever, and obviously it's predominantly on Steam now, with still being quite a bit on the consoles as well. And that's super awesome because it means that like just a lot of different, I think that sometimes a lot of the discourse and just the way that some people look at games, it's like, not all games have to be for everybody, right? Like some of the biggest mistakes I think people make when they're trying to develop a game, especially like larger AAA games, is they try to make it like for everyone. And of course, if you're making something for everyone, you're actually also kind of making something for no one.
Nobody,
right? So the fact that like we can make kind of just a weird game about walking around in the woods and talking to your supervisor on the radio, and that's fine because enough people will hopefully be interested in that.
No, I'm sure.
But someone can make like a weird game about driving like a truckload of lumber across Europe, and enough people buy that to make another one, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
That's awesome and healthy because like in most other creative media, like that also exists, right? Like no one really writes a book and expects anyone everywhere to read it, and most of the books that are like that are really bad. And so I think that's like a good sign of just like games as a form of creative expression, being like healthy and broad and able to speak to a bunch of different specific groups of people. And it is, even though like, you know, the 90s were like a wild and woolly time of being able to make all kinds of different games or whatever.
They were still very conservative.
Yeah. I'm very happy that like the way things worked out, I just happen to be making games right now because I think it's definitely like a super exciting time that just like a bunch of different factors have all lined up so that like there has never been more dishes on the buffet of rad games to play, and that is very exciting.
Because so many people will make this comparison between video games and film, right? But it's not really appropriate because like film isn't the medium, right? Motion picture is the medium, and that encompasses instructional videos and television shows and movies and Vine. That's everything, right? It's not just film. Film is a very specific, you know, sports broadcasts, right? Like film is only a bit of that quote unquote medium, right? And so same with games, like that's the best thing about games is that if you like, it's like I'm a gamer too. Oh, like I do nothing but play The Sims, right? And it's like, oh well, I don't even play games. I just watch
streams on Twitch or whatever.
Streams on Twitch. I just watch like, or I watch, you know. What was that StarCraft service? I've forgotten what it was called now. But like the professional StarCraft 2 like thing, right? You know, or even the on television in Korea, right? And it's like you're both gamers, but you might have nothing in common, right?
And that's awesome and healthy. Actually, that's not
cool.
a bad thing.
No,
like some people get very fired up and being like, "That's not a real game," or whatever. It's like that is actually the stupidest conversation to have in general. Like, what is or isn't a game? It's like that is the least interesting thing you could say about any piece of work. Period. Right?
Yeah.
Like, stop.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Wait for one more second while I think of it. So, going back to Mark of the Ninja versus Firewatch, right? It's interesting because again, like this project, like Mark of the Ninja was so, like I want to say like loud. It was like it's a great game, but it's like
about being sneaky.
Well, it's about being sneaky. Yeah, it's not literally. Yeah, it made a gigantic circle spread out from it, right? And this loud noise. But yeah, and the visual cone of the people looking at the game was like a you know,
we can stop
all-encompassing square. But the point that I'm trying to make is just that like as a designer, it's always interesting when you think like, okay, like in many ways, aside from the kind of abstract things I was talking about before, in many ways this could not be less like Mark of the Ninja. Yeah. This new game. And so as a designer, like how do you, like what do you consider to be your transferable experience from Mark of the Ninja to to Firewatch?
Well, I mean, a lot of it was kind of related to the stuff I was talking about before, right? Where it's definitely preferencing, like, allowing the player to engage with the game, again, given the constraints of, like, the game at a very high level, right? Allowing the player to engage with the game however they see fit, and then just, you know, building the game systems to, like, reinforce and support that, and being, like, as broad and consistent as possible, right? Like, a lot of, like, content-type games like this have very, very, very specific ways things can go, to the point where it's like sometimes that falls out just like literally a dialogue tree where you pick 1, 2, or 3 things and then this will happen and that will happen, but it's all very like you could just put it all out on a flow chart, and then kind of the hope with Firewatch, and part of the reason why I'm so stoked to be working with the people I am, is that like we're able to kind of make that a little bit more consistent and mushy. I mean, something like, you know, Stanley Parable or Dear Esther or whatever, like those games are awesome. I love them, but basically it's like you don't perform a lot of actions that feed back into the game, right? Like you just kind of like go through the game, experience the content. Like you can make some like very high level like navigational decisions, but that's about it. So the idea with something like I hope Firewatch is like push a little bit more of the systemic interaction there, either through like the way you engage with things in the world or the way you make dialogue selections or whatever.
Yeah.
And again, it's not necessarily like coming down to like capital C choices, but it's more just about
activities
almost, and just being consistent with the way the game provides interactions to the player, so it doesn't feel like overly, you know, like you don't feel the designer's hands in there quite as much,
or even like it doesn't feel precious or anything.
Yeah, or like overly structured or whatever, right? It feels a bit more like organic and natural, and just like basically saying to the player, you do this, like you do it however you want, and trust that we will take note of that and feed it back to you in some form or another.
Yeah. You mentioned a bit about the team that you're working with right now. How did you guys actually connect? Because you're all, it's interesting because it's like an international team. Like you're the only person in Vancouver that's part of Campo Santo.
Right. There's me in Vancouver, our art director / illustrator / all around art lord #1, Ollie Moss. He's in the UK. Our animator James Benson, who is a lord, not literally, but he could be. Okay. I mean, he might be. I don't know.
Another lord.
He's also in the UK, and then everybody else is in San Francisco. And it was definitely the kind of thing where Campo Santo started up, but basically because all of us, or most of us, had like recently shipped something that we're very happy with, and you know, we were not like furiously like burning bridges and booting out.
I'm out of here or whatever. Yeah.
It was more just like we all kind of wanted to see what it's like to do something from nothing, and then a bunch of us had just kind of known each other for a long amount of time, so we just kind of all like Katamari'd together basically. It's actually a perfectly great setup. Like we just have like a video stream basically running in the office in San Francisco. There's just like a huge TV on the far side of the room. Like the office is like tiny, right? So it's just like a giant TV that has a video like Google Hangout running all day. So me, James, and Ollie, like we just have this giant like Big Brother face on that TV, and then everybody else is just in the office working. So it's like honestly like 90% as good as just physically being in the office. And then at least for me, you know, San Francisco's like 2 hours on a plane away. Like I can jump down every couple of months for that other 10%. It's actually not that bad. Like if we didn't have that video thing running all day, I would lose my mind and be a crazy person. But since we've got that set up, it's actually pretty good.
Well, it's interesting because this is another kind of transformational thing that's happening throughout the industry, right? Because like even I know, we're talking about Hinterland Studio a little while ago, right? Which seems like they have a, not identical, but a similar kind of thing going on. And even like Polygon, I know, is quite decentralized as a group of journalists, right? Like they're like in all over the place, whatever. And they just do like you know teleconferencing or whatever to communicate with one another. It seems like that would also kind of help indies, right? That it's like you don't need an office. You don't even need, because so much of the problem with doing any kind of creative project, unless you're Brian Provinciano, is finding collaborators, right? Yeah,
exactly.
Finding people to work with.
Yeah, it is definitely nice that, I mean, this is a group of people that this group of people is all specifically working together. It's not like there were, you know, just like, oh, we just need some humans, whatever. Like, obviously we had, like, there were some people we didn't have at the outset that we needed to find, but the fact that we had the options to do that, it's like, this, like with James, for example, like Jake had just seen his Half-Life videos. Like he did these amazing Half-Life animations for both Team Fortress and actually Half-Life. He just saw them on YouTube like years ago and was like, this guy's really good. I'll keep him in mind. And then when it's Firewatch time, we're like, hey James, want to do a bunch of weird first-person animation? And he could just be in the UK and say, yeah, sure, that sounds great, and it's just done, right? Like that would not be possible without things currently being the way they are. So that is tremendously valuable, and I think also contributes to just the kind of the development climate that exists right now that's super awesome and exciting.